appreciate the effort to make it in. Anthony will say a short statement and then also we'll take all your questions.
Thank you. Any me to do levels or anything like that? Okay. Thank you everyone for coming. Basketball Australia received a notice of decision from the FIBA disciplinary panel late yesterday, and FIBA have announced their sanctions against our Australian players, against Basketball Australia and against the Philippines players and officials. Upon receiving the charges in the week of the incident, we went down a path with our lawyers. We obtained statements from all of our players, our team management, independent witnesses, Australians who were actually at the game. That amounted to over 450 pages of statements. Our submission was put in on Friday last week. It amounted to 250 pages and over 25 statements from our team officials and players. Upon receiving the notice of decision late yesterday, it's something that we take, as we said at the outset, we deeply regret the incident and our role in it, but we've received the notice of findings, and it's something that we're working through with our board tomorrow. We have a scheduled meeting there. The FIBA findings through the notice of decision are quite comprehensive, and they address all of the matters that we set out in our submission. The charges and the sanctions that have been handed down, which FIBA have released and were in our media statement, as you've seen. Our three players, Daniel Kickett, Thon Maker and Chris Goulding, have all been found guilty and have received match suspensions. It's important to note the match suspensions are for FIBA Asia qualifiers for World Cup. They don't apply to NBL for Chris and Daniel or to Thon for NBA. From a Philippines perspective, as you'll have seen in their charges, there's over 12 players and officials have been suspended for a total of 39 matches. So it's a significant penalty that's been handed down to both teams. The last point I'd like to make before I take any questions is that we're really pleased with the thoroughness of the FIBA process. And the FIBA response to us set out quite clearly that the allegations of racism that were made by some sections of the Australian media were proven to be absolutely baseless. They weren't a contributor to any of the incident that occurred, and they were found to be actually no substantive points in relation to racism. It's something that, from a Basketball Australia perspective, we take incredibly seriously when those allegations are made against us and our players. And upon hearing that, we instructed Simon Bishop, our head of integrity, to contact the one individual out of the Philippines that made that statement. He declined to provide any further information on the basis that it wasn't in the FIBA technical delegate's match report. It wasn't in our charges. It was denied by all of our players, our officials and independent witnesses at the game, and having investigated and finding no further information, we actually believe that matter is actually and officially closed. The last point I'd like to make is we've had amazing support from our fans around Australia. As we said at the outset, we regret our involvement in the incident, but the support that our players and our team have received has been overwhelming. So we do thank Australian basketball fans for their support. Happy to take questions.
Anthony, will you be contesting those charges for those three Australian players?
Look, it's unlikely that we will do that. It's something that will be a conversation with the Players Association and the players. Daniel Kickett's put out a statement through the Sydney Kings accepting his penalty. Thon Maker is in transit, so we're talking to his agents in the US, so that's one that we'll address in the coming 24 hours. And with the Players Association just following up with Chris. So it's unlikely from a Basketball Australia perspective that we'll appeal, but we do have a scheduled board meeting tomorrow, and that's something that we'll talk through.
Chris is one match ban. Is that surprising? What was the specific report?
Look, it's the FIBA findings from the panel actually set out the reason that they've provided him with a sanction. The findings of the panel were that throughout the game there was some niggle between Chris and a couple of players. The FIBA panel took the view that actually perhaps contributed to the third quarter incident. On balance, that's something that we'll talk about tomorrow as a board. Given everything that we saw with Chris under the basket with 20 players on him, it's a little tough to swallow that one, but that's a conversation that we'll have as a board tomorrow and with Chris.
Will you be imposing your own penalties on
Yeah,
the players?
thank you. It's a good question and one I'd like to address. So part of our separate process, now that we've actually got the FIBA findings, is to commence our own review. Basketball Australia has a code of conduct, and that's something that we've already established our terms of reference through Simon Bishop, our head of integrity, and that's a process that our board will tick off tomorrow, and we'll start that investigation. And there's a couple of different things that we need to look at there. There's not only the incident in the third quarter that obviously we've got significant sanctions for. There was an incident, with decals where, and I did say this at our press conference straight after the incident, where we probably didn't make the smartest decision in the world to actually rip up some decals at our training. And so that's something that we'll address as a matter of process.
What sanctions could be handed out? What sanctions could be handed out? We're talking suspension?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so in relation to our disciplinary process, that's something that we have available to us. That there are match suspensions that we can make available if that's a path that we go down.
Will they be concurrent?
They could be concurrent. So that's certainly something that we need to look at.
Why do the FIBA sanctions only apply to international play and not domestic?
So that's something that again, as part of our submission, and we also know that our counterparts of the Philippines also made the same submission, that any of those sanctions should be to FIBA international competition because that's where the incident occurred.
So just to clarify on that point then, would the possible sanctions here from Basketball Australia, would they pertain to overseas matches or?
International matches only, yeah.
Anthony, is that going to be acceptable going forward that a player could get into trouble on the court and only cop an international ban when they get paid to play, and that could be quite a sanction to them missing club games?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. The challenge that we have in these matters is that FIBA's the arbiter for international games. So any sanction that they apply applies to international games. Whilst under the umbrella of the hierarchy, FIBA's our international body, we're the national federation, and we sanction leagues in this country, NBL, WNBL and the like. Those sanctions only apply at that international level.
Would players be justified in feeling, if they are sanctioned by both bodies, that they're being doubly penalised?
Yeah, that certainly could be a view that they take, but let us go through that investigation and process before we speculate what the outcomes are, and then two, how the players might feel through that.
And will FIBA's full report be released, or just the stage?
Look, we've asked FIBA that question, and now the preliminary advice is no, it won't. It's a confidential report shared with both national federations. I'm more than happy for you to take that up with FIBA, though.
How long will your process take?
I'll look at something that we'll confirm tomorrow in terms of starting that. I don't believe it'll take that long, matter of weeks.
What about the penalties handed down to the Philippines Basketball Association? Obviously pretty hefty, but they were very ugly scenes. What did you make of those?
Look, I think the counterpoint is the proportionality. 12 players and officials suspended for 39 games. That's a match sanction in the first instance. But also, if you read the FIBA sanction, it also applies to their next match, their next Asia qualifier, played behind closed doors. What that means is that there's no crowd, no media, no sponsorship, no revenue coming from that game. So it's also a double penalty. It's also it's probably the one last step before actually suspending them from competition. So it is actually a pretty hefty sanction that FIBA have made against the Philippines.
There were calls for their coaches and people involved who were throwing punches to be maybe barred. A one-match suspension of their coach, do you think that's light?
Look, it's not my job to comment on the Philippines sanctions. So we'll comment and make observations as it relates to our Australian players. That's a sanction, that's a pretty significant one for a head coach to actually be barred from an international game. Where that stacks up, that's not our place to actually make a comment on that.
Has the incident damaged Australian basketball's international reputation?
Look, it's a question that I was asked the day after. It's certainly, and I did use the expression, it was a black eye, and I still stand by that. I think that's right. I think that's something that, and I made the contrast when I spoke previously that the game that we played against Japan in Tokyo 2 days before was a thrilling 1-point match. It was played in the right spirit. It was a fantastic contest. that's the way we play our basketball. So what we saw in the Philippines was the polar opposite of how we want to go about that. So the challenge that's in front of our players, our team management is to, when we go out on the court, we play, it's a bit cliche to me to say, but, hard and fair and within the spirit of the game. And we'll be judged on our actions as we go through the next window of FIBA qualifiers through September, November, February, and then ultimately onto the World Cup.
Anthony, will there be, once it's all said and done, will Australia ask FIBA to review how they do these disciplinary hearings and how long they take? So it's been, 16, 17 days since it's happened.
Oh look, Roy, it's also worth noting that both the Philippines and Australia, Basketball Australia asked for an extension. So it was the quantum of the number of charges that we actually asked for more time. So, all things being equal, and the first response was that, we would have this wrapped up, probably by Friday last week. We asked for an extension to Friday of last week, which has then moved the time frame. The challenge that FIBA has in these new competition windows, and I tried to explain this in the press conference we had earlier, was that we're in a new regime for FIBA, in that play, we get on a plane and we come home. Formerly any of these disciplinary panels and charges would happen during a tournament where you're actually together for 2 or more weeks, everyone's in the one city, and then off you go. So that made it a little bit difficult for FIBA to respond to that.
And might the level of bans in future need a look at as well? Because as much as 6 games or 5 games seems a long time for international play, people at home will look at that and go, oh, you threw punches on court and that's all you got.
Yeah, it's important to put the context of, 6 games for, AFL or league or our domestic codes. Whilst, in one sense, I saw, Daniel Kickett's charge apply to an AFL, head high, intentional, and all those things that go with it. This is international play. So a 6-game or a 5-game suspension, and 5 for us and 6 for one of the Filipino players, takes them out of the next round of the whole next set of FIBA qualifiers. So it means those, and for Daniel, he doesn't play in the September window, doesn't play in the November window, and if Pick would play in 1 game in the February window, it actually takes him out of a fairly large chunk of international qualifiers. And I think that's important to actually understand, that this isn't a week-by-week competition, so 1, 3, 5, 6, are they meaningless? So these actually go over a significant period.
Is Basketball Australia's investigation of this completed now, and did it look at how it got out of hand so quickly? The formal review that we will do is to actually ask and answer the question that you just asked. Our process was responding to the FIBA charges. So our 250-page submission was to defend our players, defend our position as a national federation in response to those charges. The next review that we do will answer those questions. How did we make a decision to rip up decals? How did a game get out of control that quickly? One of the key elements in the FIBA findings came back was we didn't act quickly enough to restrain our players in a brawl. You've got to look at that and go, well, in real time, it happened really, really fast, and it was out of control really, really quickly. So we'll have a look at those findings and try and peel the layers onion away there just to understand whether we could have done something a little bit differently. That's something that we'll have a look at in the next couple of weeks as part of that process.
With your own sanctions, are you obliged to use the FIBA ones as a benchmark, for want of a better term?
No. That's their process, and ours is completely separate. Yep.
And will you challenge the fine, or was that going to be a big part of the board discussion, whether you accept that fine or not?
Yeah, look, really, the fine component is the one for me that is disproportionate, if I may say. Ours is 100,000 Swiss francs. The Philippines Federation is 250,000 Swiss francs. I think the player one is proportionate. There's an element in our fine where we've been fined 25,000 Swiss francs for the decal issue. Now, we believe we addressed that with Philippines basketball. We made a formal apology that was accepted, and we actually worked that through prior to the game. So that's something that we'll take up with FIBA. We've got a 14-day appeal process that's available to us, but that's a key consideration of our board tomorrow.
Thanks.
Any more questions? Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Anthony.